Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. Throwing a quick video together here to talk more about bleeding control. We do have some revisions to the way that we care and manage life-threatening critical bleeds, and this is for individuals that do not have a tourniquet available. So first of all, what is life-threatening? So life-threatening bleeding can be classified as bleeding that continually soaks through gauze pads. In other words, we cannot control or stop the bleeding. That's going to be life-threatening, in which we'll obviously, call 911, activate the EMS system, and begin care. The second is the flow of blood, so blood that is bright red in appearance or color, that is gushing, spurting, or flowing continuously is treated as life-threatening. And the other thing we have is volume. So in other words, how much blood is lost. So if you use the rule of ounces, we have about 6 ounces of blood loss. And basically, if you picture yourself with a 12-ounce can of a beverage, you dump half of that can on the floor, that would be the equivalent of what life-threatening bleeding would look like. And again, that will typically be pooling around the individual's body on the floor or wherever it is that they're at, right? So that's kind of how we can determine what life-threatening bleeding is. So we identify this, obviously we obtain consent, we activate the EMS system. What's next, right? So we get the first aid kit, we grab an AED machine to be sure. We don't have a tourniquet available. Again, for life-threatening bleeds, it's ideal to use a tourniquet, but oftentimes you may not have that. So when we are dealing with life-threatening bleeding, we use what we call direct pressure. So we'll use a hand-over-hand technique, and we're gonna let the person know it's probably gonna be uncomfortable, this might hurt, and we're gonna grab gauze pads with gloves on and push directly over top of the injury with the gauze pad, and we're gonna go shoulders over hands, similar to the body position of CPR cycles, right? So we have to push hard to control life-threatening bleeding. So we're gonna hold tight with direct pressure. Hand-over-hand technique, shoulders over hands, straight up and down motions, that way we are holding tight, pushing down. We are going to do this until we see blood stop soaking through gauze pads. So, oftentimes when it comes to bleeding emergencies, we're probably gonna have blood soak through the first gauze pad. In those situations, we'll just add a second gauze pad. Now, what if blood soaks through that second gauze pad, right? We are going to remove only the second pad and then add a new second gauze pad. We'll continually do that back and forth until blood stops soaking through the second gauze pad. So in other words, one of the changes to the program is we no longer just stack and layer gauze pads on top of an injury. We've noticed now that actually weakens direct pressure, and to have the highest probability of stopping bleeding, we do need to remove that second one, keeping the first one in place and just replacing only the second one. So once bleeding stops, we've controlled it with direct pressure using gauze pad. We can now grab our roller bandage, wrap nice and tight around that, checking for circulation beyond the injury. Of course, if it's a leg injury, we'll check the toes. If it's an arm injury, we'll check the fingers. So we kind of go through and do those checks toward the end there and wait for EMS to arrive and take over providing care. So there are some tweaks and refinement that we have here to controlling life-threatening bleeding, a couple different things that we'll do. You'll notice in many first aid CPR classes that you take, you are not gonna hold direct pressure on another person in the class in terms of peer-to-peer. The reason for that is because we do have to push hard. We obviously don't want to injure anybody or create any problems for individuals. So usually what you see nowadays is a simulated limb, maybe a pool noodle, a foam roller, a PVC pipe. These are all things that instructors are usually providing in classes that kind of give you a good feel of what it would look like, right? And your body position for that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video, understanding some differences we have with life-threatening bleeding. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much for watching today.